Hi, everyone. I always love speaking first in the morning when everybody's still drowsy. So I'll try to keep this presentation, actually it was intended this way, to be a little bit light because I know we have a crowd here where some folks are more technical, some folks a little bit more hobbyist. But I want to discuss kind of macro trends because I think that when we zoom out to 100,000 feet and we look down at what's happening in blockchain, I think it becomes a little bit easier to not only feel comfortable that we kind of understand the trajectory of things, but I think it's easier for us to agree on the trends that are happening, and then it becomes a question of when they happen and how they happen and who's going to accomplish it. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what I like to refer to as the Great Migration. And in case you don't know, there's a trend going on where increasingly Web 2 entrepreneurs are starting to get into blockchain, and they're starting to create Web 3 companies. And I don't have a great stat here, but there was a presentation by venture firm Andreessen Horowitz from Silicon Valley recently. They gave us some really interesting numbers. And the bottom line is everything trends up like a hockey stick. Every day, more developers, more companies, more funding. And you would have walked through Silicon Valley 3-4 years ago, you would have found very few blockchain entrepreneurs. You go today, and every other entrepreneur you'll find that's starting a new online service is actually thinking about it in a Web3 context. So the trend is very, very clear. And now the question is why? Why is it happening? And what do we do about it? So, before we begin, I want to touch on the most basic notion that often people don't think about. But this is the reason people are moving to Web3, all right? And it's basically the concept of standards. Standards are very, very powerful things. And we all know what a standard is, but sometimes we don't really intellectualize it. So let's just talk on a very basic level. What is a standard, all right? A standard is like the difference between England and English, all right? England is a place. It has a government, it has a set of rules, it has a culture, it has all these different things. But English is a standard. It's an agreement. It's a consensus between people. It might be easy or easier to shut down or conquer or change a country, but English, shut down English, okay? It exists in our minds. It's just an agreement between people. But these standards create the foundations of everything we know. In fact, you can say standards inevitably triumph, right? So if we just look at some of the basis of our high-tech world, we look at computers, right? Processing data. They all started off as proprietary, many different types of computer architectures. Today we know it's all IBM PC-compatible architecture. It already won in the mid-late 80s. We look at software. It's almost all open source in terms of, go talk to any startup today versus startup 20 years ago. Ask them what stack they use, what software they use. It's almost all open source. Look at the internet. Before the internet, we had a bunch of proprietary networks. All were replaced with a standard. And now we come to the last piece of the puzzle, maybe the most dramatic piece, maybe the most consequential piece in terms of how much it will change our world. And these are the databases. These are the ways in which we store information over time and space. And these things are all proprietary, right? And a little over 10 years ago, with the invention of Bitcoin, we had the first standard for databases. Now, when we want to imagine what the consequence of something like standards in databases will do to the online services we consume every day, the best example I like to give is email. Think about email. Email is almost the only online service that survived in a decentralized format. And we can debate whether it's exactly a service, but back in the day, for those who are old enough to remember, we used to have Usenet for forums. We used to have IRC for chat. The whole internet started decentralized, right? All of these lost out to their centralized competitors because their centralized competitors could make better user experience. They could deal with all the issues of payments. They could deal with the challenges that early decentralized internet protocols could not handle because they didn't have a decentralized database. So email was the only one that survived. It's actually the most popular online service. And when we try to imagine the way that Web3 is going to reconfigure the services we use today, I like to give email as an example. Think about it. We all understand it intuitively. You can be on Outlook, I can be on Hotmail. Let's say I really love my Hotmail account from back in the day. Somebody else can be on Gmail. We can all communicate with each other because there is a standard called SMTP for transferring emails. Different commercial companies can create different applications, like the ones you see over here, and they can compete with each other, right? I can be on one, you can be on the other. There's no cost, there's no real cost to moving. I'm not locked in. And because of that, we have nonstop, constant innovation, right? When we look forward into what Web3 will do to the common online services we use today, I think email is a great example. It's a great intuitive example. And so this is, not the most beautiful graphic, but this gives you a sense of what, for example, social networks will look like by the end of the decade. You're going to have users who will be using essentially a network protocol that is your social network, or your image network, or your video sharing network, or your microblogging service, and you'll have a series of commercial applications. I just called it Facebook 1, 2, and 3, but imagine every one of these is a different company. Everyone will make a different front end. Everyone will make a different user experience. Everyone will commercialize it in a different way, but they will all use the same data layer in the middle, and the users will have ownership over their data, which means Facebook 1 might say, I'm going to give you 80% of the ad revenue. And Facebook 2 might say, I'll give you 90% of the ad revenue. And Facebook 3 might do something else, right? And there will be actual competition, unlike today, where there's no longer real competition in Web 2. Because every single vertical on the internet in Web 2 is a monopoly. And once there's a monopoly, it's game over, right? And of course, they're a monopoly because they have a closed proprietary database. All the videos are on YouTube, so I can't make another YouTube. Nobody would switch. The cost would be too high. Everybody's on Facebook. I can make another Facebook. I can't expect all of my friends to move over before it will be useful, right? But in a Web3 configuration, I don't need all my friends to move. They can all stay on Facebook 1. I like Facebook 2 because it's pink and purple. I like Facebook 3 because, I don't know, it caters to people more like me. I move by myself, my friends stay where they are, and we can still communicate with each other. That is the inevitable future of almost all online services. And by the way, the companies know this, right? I mean, Facebook knows this. There's the reason they changed their name. Now, the other great advantage we have, of course, is that in Web3 services, you can tokenize not only the data, but you can tokenize the value creation. I mean, think about imagine if Facebook would have said, you know what? I'm going to give out 50% of the equity in Facebook, all right? And I'm taking off my lawyer securities hat for a second. But I'm going to give out 50% of the equity in Facebook to the users in the first 5 years. That's effectively what you can do with Web3 companies. The first users in Facebook, I mean, they had the worst Facebook experience ever. It's not the Facebook of today, right? It was still buggy. It wasn't as feature-rich. What did they get for being those early adopters? They got nothing. Additionally, today, you look at companies like Reddit or basically almost every online service, how much of their revenue do they share? Usually it's 0%. Users create all the value in a social network like Reddit, let's say, and users get 0% of the value. And it's not only because Reddit doesn't want to share it. I mean, they have no reason to share it. They're a monopoly. A monopoly has no reason to innovate. Once somebody becomes a monopoly, their only goal is to extract more value from the users, right? But now with blockchain and tokenization, sharing the value becomes logistically much easier. You can send somebody a cent or 10 cents or $1.50, right? But most importantly, the users can actually control the data and thus dictate where the value goes. I want to just give one example of kind of emerging Web3 social networks. So there's this really great project called BBS, and BBS is decentralized Reddit, right? And it helps us imagine where I think all centralized online services are going to go. So it looks just like Reddit, it works just like Reddit. The only difference with BBS is 100% of the revenue gets divided up by the people who create the value, as opposed to 0. 2, because the users own their own data, and because the authentication is in that shared network layer, you can run this BBS on any website. You don't have to go to reddit.com and everything is there. You can go to website 1, website 2, website 3, but you have the same login on every website. And if you've been to one, you can hop to the other. It's not moving to a new network. And then, You know, it kind of leads us to this. I know our time is almost up, so I'm giving you guys the very, very quick version. But if I had to, you know, ask myself, what are the main characteristics of Web3? First of all, I would say it's the notion of digital self-sovereignty. And if you could take only one sentence away from this entire speech, it's digital self-sovereignty. That's the point of Web3. That's the point of blockchain. It means we're in control of our own digital self. And as the world becomes more digital, our digital self is our money. It's all of our posts on Facebook. It's all of our online activity. That's our creation. That's our property. In the future, and even now in some of these kind of early products, we can own the value we create online. The second thing is, well, we talked about, you know, the property, but the other important notion is, you know, we hear a lot about censorship. What should be censored? Who should be the censor? Right? We see this debate now a lot on Twitter with Elon Musk. And the reality is in Web3, the whole notion changes. It's not about who should be the censor. It's about choosing your own censor, right? Because we all want some degree of censorship, right? There are things that are illegal in this country, they're illegal in other countries, they should be illegal. You don't want to see that stuff online, right? You want people to have some accountability. But in a Web3 context, you get to choose who censors you. Because many, many, many people can run the online service. Remember the Facebook 1, 2, 3? Right? Maybe one of them says, I'm going to censor, you know, the obvious stuff, right? Child pornography and all kinds of horrible stuff. The other one's going to be like, you know, I'm going to censor disinformation. And I will determine that this is disinformation. And somebody else will determine that something else is disinformation. And I, as a user, I'm no longer captive to one monopoly. I can say, you know, I believe in this, in the way that they like to censor content. They will be my censor. So this notion of kind of choosing your own censor really addresses and solves all the problem around censorship. So just a very brief word about Tectona. Tectona is, I believe, Israel's only public blockchain company. There might be another one by now. But you can think of us like a private equity for digital assets. So we do algo trading, we do investments, and we partner with companies. We also incubate companies in-house. Here's kind of a few of our favorite investments and kind of partnerships and stuff that we've also been a part of creating. If you're an entrepreneur out there, if you've got great ideas, whatever their stage is, or if you're looking to join teams, reach out to us. You can see hello@tektona.io. We'd love to hear more about you. And you know, I see the time is up here, but I'll just say one word. This is an amazing, amazing project. If you've heard of OpenAI, okay, a project that I personally love and moved AI forward over the last decade in amazing ways, and we learned so much from it. But this project, BoardAI, is the Web3 version of OpenAI. Whereas OpenAI is owned by a few, you know, very, very smart billionaires, and it's not actually open. None of you can go and use OpenAI. BoardAI allows you not only to use the AI, but it allows you to be a part owner of the AI, to commercialize the AI, to create, whether it's NFTs or other things that you want to make out of it. There's a booth outside. You can learn more about it. But this was born inside Tectona. It's part of Tectona Labs. It's now kind of grown up and become, you know, it's like a kid that moved out of the house and is feeding himself now. So we're very, very proud of this project and would love to share more with you about it. But again, this is an example of you know, new projects emerging which empower the users to be collective owners in the journey rather than just, you know, show up at the IPO and buy some Uber at 80 billion. So love to share more about this, and thank you all for your time.